So Andrea Balboni, we are so glad to have you here for the second time. And I don't know what it is. It might just be the topic that you're talking about, but definitely by far the most popular YouTube video on our channel. And we are going to talk some more about understanding sex and how sex comes into coaching, and also just talking about the topic in general for ourselves personally and professionally. So thanks so much for agreeing to coming to do a second round. Over to you.
Thanks, Lucille. I just wanted to get a sense before we start. Roland, I know you didn't see the first one, but did anyone else watch the first iteration of this? Joe did. Okay, yeah, great. So welcome everyone who's new, and welcome back, Joe. And for anyone who's watching in the catch up, hello to you as well. I was also quite surprised, Lucille, to see the numbers on the YouTube video go up and up and up. I think we have something like 8,500 or something views, which is, kind of okay. Did it go viral? And whilst part of me is surprised, another part of me isn't, because the topic of sex and the erotic isn't one that's often spoken to, especially in coaching circles.
Exactly.
And so because we've taken the reins here and are pioneering the space a bit, there are things, work that's been done definitely in the therapeutic space, and I'll borrow a lot from that space. In the coaching world, there's not so much that's spoken to as far as transference, countertransference, but specifically erotic, sexualized transference. So I'm excited to dive deeper into the topic. So for you guys for Joe, it'll be some of the stuff that a lot of the things that I spoke to in the first time around will come up again, and this time we'll go a bit deeper in and a bit more specific. So it's kind of a deepening and expansion of the first session if you watched it. And there are certain areas that I'm speaking to more because they came up in the first session and sounded like they wanted more exploration from myself. I was also curious professionally, personally, on some of the key points that came through, and then also just to give more, to explore this space more, because it's tender territory, can feel a bit edgy. And so my invitation to everyone here is always, first and foremost, to take care of yourself. So whenever first I'll maybe share a little bit. I'm Andrea Balboni. I'm a sex, love, and relationships coach, and I'm trauma informed. So my certifications have come in the form of specifically coaching for the realm of relationships and intimacy, and then also with a trauma informed lens. So I always welcome everyone to practice radical self-care when speaking about this topic, because we all have had different experiences with intimacy, with sex, with the erotic, and it can sometimes be triggering if those experiences haven't been positive. And because we live in a sex negative culture for the most part, the likelihood of you having experienced some form of negative impact or impression or imprint onto your experience of sex and intimacy is likely there. So take radical self-care of yourself. If you need to, at any point, turn your screen off or leave the session, or just if you want to listen the whole time, don't want to participate when I maybe cue for sharing or ask if anyone wants to share, take care of yourself first. So that is completely respected and recognized by me as your respect to self, and taking care of what you need in this tender space creates some safety as well, so we can talk about this topic a little bit more openly. How does all that sound? Okay, yay, good. If you will have a question to ask, Roland, thank you for unmuting yourself. If you have a question to ask, you can unmute yourself and ask away. If it feels like a tender, shy, you feel a little shy around it, or you don't necessarily want the whole world to know you've got a question that feels edgy, you can always DM me. So just go into the two at the bottom of the chat, choose me and direct message me the question. I'll ask and answer it anonymously. So you can have your questions. Or when Lucille's going to trade positions with Cherise, you can also field the questions to them and then they'll feed them to me. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And if there is anyone who does want to share, I would love to hear what brought you here. What are you curious about learning or exploring? It could be in regards to your practice and the space in your practice, or even just curiosity around the topic in general in your life or the lives of friends that you know. If anyone wants to share, maybe in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and be like, I'm curious because this is never spoken about, or I'm curious because, yeah, Lucille, go ahead.
So I'm happy to kick us off. And I have a curiosity that's been building around the session, and it's about who shows up to us talking about this topic openly. And I'd love to know, from an Enneagram perspective, who here are sexual dominant subtypes on the Enneagram, if you know your Enneagram style. So I'll put my hand up. Anyone else is sexual dominant? Okay, well, that's interesting. How many of you are self-praise dominant? Okay, so there's a lot of social dominance. Okay, that was a personal curiosity. Who shows up for the session and who's willing to talk about it? I guess for me, part of what we're always talking about at Aephoria is also how do we bring some of the richness of understanding what happens in the one-on-one support space that has been developed and spoken about quite openly in the therapeutic space for decades, that then comes into a more performance-based, if we want to call it coaching space, where we pretend that these things don't exist and that transference and counter-transference isn't happening. How do we open up that conversation? Because if we're not talking about some of those things, then I think they get us into trouble. I think that's one of the things. I guess one of the other things that would be useful for me to explore is I am working at the moment in a highly traumatized paramilitary environment, and working mostly in team coaching rather than individual coaching, although I've had some individual conversations as well. And in that space, a lot of people are, and then it's a very male dominated environment as well. A lot of people are bringing into the space comments like, the reason I only have one child is because of what happened in, you know, the circumstances when we were in the heavy war period of what we were busy with. You know, is a lot of stuff around the impact of the trauma and stress from the paramilitary workspace into intimacy in their relationships. And they were at a place in the process where people are starting to openly talk about it within their colleagues and talking about alcohol addiction and other stuff too. And I'm curious what could be useful for that space. So trauma and intimacy challenges when they do come up in environments that have high levels of trauma that they're processing.
Great. Yeah, wow, fantastic areas of query, Lucille. I love it. I just had a quick question. So some of those questions will be answered throughout the present, or aspects of the questions will be answered throughout the presentation. And yeah, so I would say let's dive in. And if at those points there's more for me to add that I don't have necessarily included that relates to your question, and I've noted it. So I'm going to speak to that then. But really,
perfect. And I'll catch up with the recording if I'm not here for the whole session. So don't feel that you need to start there. There might be other useful starting places in this group.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious also to hear if anyone else had any specific, anything specific they came with.
I'll just echo a little bit of what Lucille said. I've always been interested in transference and counter-transference, and I think you're right, Lucille, it doesn't really get addressed in coaching, especially since I come from sort of a philosophical coaching background, maybe philosophical, biological, whereas I think if you came to coaching from a psychological methodology, then you would possibly run into it in supervision. But other than that, I've never heard about it. And I think I've experienced it a lot. So, and at times not handled it very well. So that's got me curious. The other thing is my understanding of transference and countertransference is that it's quite necessary for transformation. And so linked to the first aspect, linked to the first part of what we said, how does that work? Where's the line? And then the other thing is, so that links to the reason I became a coach, is because I was quite interested in the intimacy of the job. And it's still why I'm here. In fact, when you ask about sexual social, for a very long time, I believed that my instinct was sexual, and I still some days do. But my Aephoria assessment had me as social. It also, because my understanding of my type has changed, that also makes sense, but that's another long story. And lastly, there were a couple of personal questions on the mailer that also got me intrigued. So that's another reason I'm here.
Fantastic. So much richness, Roland. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of those things. I am going to speak to a lot of it in today's. I'm like, phew, okay, I prepared the right stuff. So it feels really good to hear those questions asked. And then I'm going to out myself. I don't know the Enneagram so well and so intimately to be able to speak directly to it. So I will rely on Cherise and Lucille to maybe help me out in those moments where it might feel like those insights are valuable to whatever points we're speaking to. So I'm just completely I have a bit of familiarity, and there's definitely a lot. I could go a lot deeper. So thank you for that support. I'm asking for quite humbly. Excellent. So questions are welcome throughout. If you want to interrupt or interject or come on in, either by the chat or unmuting yourself, please do. It helps me stay on track with where you guys are at, what's happening in the field. And as I get excited about the topic, I can tend to go boom and get on a little bit of a soapbox. So I'll come back down, bring me back in. It helps me. And I see, Tanya, that you're unmuted. So I'm wondering if you wanted to share. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm recently qualified as a life coach, actually a Jungian life coach. So we that's like the first thing we do is the transference and the countertransference. And I've had many, many years of Jungian psychotherapy as well, or analysis. So there's a difference. But I don't know anything about this Enneagram, Aephoria. I don't know what that is. So I'm quite curious to find out about that. But my reason for coming here is because, when I did my marketing and I started marketing my niche and trying to narrow down what it is that I really want to work with, which is a really hard thing to do. But I decided to become a Jungian love coach. And in Jungian speak, we always go where the wounding is. And so, that's where the light shines through. And so that's been my journey, my life, is to get relationships right. Or love relationships, specifically romantic love, or possibly not romantic love. I mean, romantic love is an illusion, but anyway, to get that right. And I've just got my first client who's American, and it's quite anxiety provoking for me because she's paying me real money and she has questions, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't know anything. I don't know what to do. And so I saw this, and it's so pertinent because sex is going to come up, and how do we talk about it? And very basic, like, where do we start,
Yeah, great.
So that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Great questions. And I just want to thank Aephoria for creating this space for us to be with these really nebulous and tricky questions. They're complex, they're nuanced. And again, I feel like we're pioneering. There's been a lot of work done and it's been spoken to in a lot of spaces, but in the coaching space, and specifically around erotic or sexualized transference, and specifically around sexualized transference, it's been largely ignored until quite recently, actually. So that's why I wanted to specifically go into that aspect of transference, countertransference, because it's been there's still a lot of space that where it wants speaking to, understanding, and then integrated and practiced. So hopefully this will be a beginning of many conversations and many points of discussion around what feels right and what doesn't, where the lines are drawn, where they're not, where the law comes in, where it doesn't, where there are gaps, where there are holes and spaces like that. So yeah, shall we begin? Does anyone else want to share before I kind of hop into it? Does anyone else want to share yeah, anything else that came up from them, just from what's been already?
Yeah, I just to answer the question as to what brings me here is having seen that it popped up as a topic a while ago, I was curious that it was happening within the coaching space, because I live in the therapeutic space. And then when it came up again, I was like, this is fascinating that Aephoria is going there again. I need to come and hear what's going on.
Amazing. So someone from the therapeutic space, hurrah. So yes, yeah, it's things happen differently there than in the coaching space, and there's a spectrum. So I kind of consider the work I do therapeutic coaching out of necessity because of the space that I've chosen to focus on. However, it's definitely coaching, not therapy. Well, there are elements of both, which is why there's this kind of eclipse or this shared space. And within the coaching that I do, even though it's intimacy, it's sex and intimacy, there isn't so much spoken to around transference, countertransference, even in the trainings that I've done that have been trauma informed and very, very deep and important trainings that had a lot. I mean, we spoke to so much, and yet this area, we never really had a session like this where we just went deep into what do you do if things come up like this, boundaries, yes, but never specifically around this thing of transference, countertransference. So so this has been as much for me as it is for those that I share to, a space of learning again. So if there are parts that are clunky or not quite, oh, she's missing something there, very much appreciated, flagging it up, letting me know so that I can also learn together with everyone else. So yeah, Sarah Ann, any comments will be absolutely considered, or if I misunderstood or am not quite accurate about something that I've taken from the therapy world, please do let me know so that I can shift, pivot, change position, change direction, or become more accurate. Yeah,
thank you for hosting it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so I'll just give a really brief overview of what we spoke to last time and what we're going to do this time. So the last time we spoke to the fact that we all have an erotic history. So we all have some experience of sex, of intimacy, of the erotic because of the world we live in. So even if we've never actually had an experience of sex or intimacy, we've gotten messaging about it, and we've heard and learned a lot about it from the society and culture that we live in. So we all have some relationship to this idea, we'll have it as a concept of sex, intimacy, and relationships, relationality. So there's kind of no getting around it. So the fact that it gets ignored a lot in the world of business coaching is testament to the fact of, well, I'll speak to it later, but it's a natural part of being human to have, to feel attraction and to feel erotic energy and experience it in different forms of relationship, whether they're business or friendship or other forms of relationship. So we've all got it. We all experience it. Let's talk about it and learn how to be with it responsibly rather than ignoring it and pushing it down. So We talked about what erotic transference and countertransference is, and when it's problematic, when it kind of causes us to need to be with it, why it happens, and what to do about it. And then I spoke a bit about my own practice, what I do as a sex and intimacy coach, and how I help couples and individuals. So this time around, so watch the first one, it's fantastic. And if you're here on the second one, know that that you've heard the first one, we'll again go deeper in certain spaces. So where we'll go deeper in is how to recognize erotic transference and countertransference when it's happening, how to name it. So there were questions last time specifically about, but what language do I use? What verbiage would what would I say to bring it up? Like, where do I even start? So we're going to speak to that, how to manage it in your coaching practice, and how to be with it. I also go a bit more deeply into ethical considerations that came up in the last time, when it's legal or not legal, but also the ethical implications of it as well. And then any other questions around sex and intimacy anyone wants to ask, so there were some of the personal ones in there, we've got those as well. So those will be coming up too. And let's see. So you guys also know I'm a sex, love, and intimacy coach, as I already shared. So because it's trauma informed, we work a lot with modern psychology and a lot with the nervous system and around trauma healing. And then I also come from a background that is steeped in Eastern tradition. So working with in the world of Tantra and Taoist sexual practices, and understanding the energy of the erotic and how it moves and flows and works in our bodies and in our beings. So I have kind of like my practices, I would say, a mix of East and West. And that will come through in today's as we explore today's topic as well. So just a reminder on radical self-care, you can at any time exit the conversation, and yeah, it's all good. I have some slides I'm going to share, but before I share them, I just want to state that it is inappropriate and unethical under any circumstances for a coach to act on feelings of eros or sexual attraction towards a client whilst the work is going on. There's not a question or a doubt that it is inappropriate and unethical. It's actually not always illegal in certain countries, but it's definitely inappropriate and definitely unethical. So I just wanted to state that out front. However, feelings of erotic attraction, as I was saying, are part of being human. So they will likely turn up in the work that you're doing because you're working with other humans. And it's totally normal, and it's okay. Yeah, it's okay for your client to feel an attraction to you. It's okay for you to feel attraction to the client. It's what you do with that energy, what you do with those feelings, that is important. And that's what we'll look at today. Okay. All right. Our focus always as coaches, whether it's therapeutic coaching or coaching in the business world, whatever it is, we are here to support our clients' well-being and their growth. And maybe, if we're lucky, and I would say pretty much almost always, understand ourselves better. So to Roland's point, we're here for our clients and to support them. And also we are here because it's a space for us to learn more about ourselves and how we are in the world. And so when we affront a topic like this and really look at it fully for what it is in the face, we can begin to understand aspects and elements of ourselves that may want shifting or changing or looking at or attention, as much as we are understanding what's happening potentially for our clients. Okay. All right. All righty. Let's see. So I'm going to share my I'm a little naughty because this presentation has a lot of words on it, which I know is a bit of a naughty thing to do, but I'm going to kind of read from the slides a little bit. So apologies for being like doing the novice move and the whole presentation thing. Let's see if I can get the right screen up. All right, and I'm going to attempt to make it pretty to present to you guys. Okay, so because in coaching it doesn't often get spoken to, I just wanted to first describe transference and countertransference. So transference is when a person, like your client, redirects some of their feelings and desires for another person or for something that they want to experience in life, some feeling, something they want to have, something that they maybe didn't get or haven't gotten from life, onto their coach or therapist. Yeah, we'll go into it a bit more deeply later on. Countertransference is when you, as coach or therapist, redirect some of your own feelings or desires onto your client. It may be a reaction to the client's transference, but not always. Yeah, so it can happen independently of your client, projecting onto you emotion or feelings that they're experiencing. It can happen independently of that or as a response to that. All right, did I do it right? So sexualized transference is understood as erotic transference, which includes positive transferences like love, affection, and trust that can be beneficial to the healing process, that can actually help the client, get to where they want to go, accompanied by feelings of attraction, intimacy, and sexual fantasies that the client understands to be unrealistic. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily interfere with the client's healing or growth, or for your experience of being able to do the work with the client, because the client understands that it's unrealistic, that it's maybe they understand, maybe they don't understand the ethical aspects of it. They probably don't know what to do with it in either case. And maybe you don't either, which is why you're here and listening to this, maybe. Eroticized transference instead is intense, vivid, all-consuming sexual attraction for that coach or therapist. The client will book sessions or attempt to come near you or do things to get close to you, and the behavior is inappropriate, but also it detracts from their own healing journey. It becomes all-consuming. Yeah, it's detracting. It's not helping them out. They can't focus on the things they're meant to focus on. They're hoping that you'll respond. They'll play into getting a response, and it's to an intensity level where it's definitely out of the phase of erotic transference, where okay, could be healthy. Let's work with this energy into a phase or space of okay, this really needs to be sat with in a different way and considered differently. Does anyone have any questions so far on that stuff? Keep going if not. Let's see. Okay, so are you ready to work with sexualized transference? Some of the questions to ask yourself are, and these are questions that if I were going to do business coaching or had training in business coaching, I would have never thought to ask myself ever, because it wouldn't have necessarily come up. Because I did sex, love, and relationships coaching, it's a whole other game. Our work was around integrating our experience of sex and intimacy so that we could work with people from a healthy space. Yeah. So some of the questions to ask yourself are, do you feel able to be accepting of whatever emerges that your client shares with you about their erotic or sexual life? Are you able to hear details of sexual fantasies or desire for a romantic relationship from a client who expresses them to you? Are you able to help your client understand why it's happening, why this whole thing is happening, that they're feeling this attraction towards you? And this also, I just want to extend this to, if you're working in a business context with a client and they express to you, maybe it's not even a desire for you. If it's a desire for one of their colleagues, can you answer any of these questions with yeah, actually, I know how to be with it. Yeah, this is what I would do. This is how I would say. This is what I would. So I just wanted to extend that out to, are you ready to, even if it's not directed towards you, if it were directed towards other, because it happens a lot in the business world, let's say it. Are you ready to be with this subject matter if it comes up? So how confident are you in ethically managing erotic transference or counter transference in therapy and coaching? So we've already kind of spoken at the very beginning to, well, I don't know, because I never really learned how, or no one really speaks to it that much. So I'm not sure. Let's see, before we go on to the next thing. All right. Does anyone want to share? Just gonna stop sharing for a minute. Does anyone want to share how they're feeling right now just by hearing some of these questions get asked in this way? Anything that's come up?
I think it's quite exciting, because I think certainly as I've got older and longer in my practice, the questions come more frequently. And, you know, when they first come, when they first used to come, I used to like catch myself thinking, oh my word, I'm having this conversation, you know, and you know, like, how does that feel? Like I'm having a conversation in my own head in that space. And now it's like I can hear them coming before they come, the questions. So it's good. It's, for me, it's great that we're having this conversation, because it seems more prevalent to me as time goes on, as relationships in therapy or coaching last longer. People get to a point where they go, and maybe I'll also ask this question, or maybe I'll also, you know, there is, if you've got long-term clients or coaching clients, there is an intimacy, you know, and so it becomes a safer environment to have the conversations in.
Yeah, thanks for that reflection, Sarah. I just lost the presentation on my thing. Where did it go? How funny. Does anyone else want to add anything else?
Hi, Andrea. Hi, everybody. Sorry I was late.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those questions remind me, I do volunteer work for Lifeline in terms of counseling and mental health and those kind of things. And there's those questions remind me of the red flags that we identify in training as counselors, so that you know that if it comes up, what is your reaction, you know, and the thing is around if there was some kind of, even if it's not necessarily a bad thing like sexual abuse, but it is something like people showing interest in more than one partner, you know, open relationships. How do I feel about that? And then how am I able to hold that space? So those questions just reminded me of that.
Yeah. And so, Cherise, because you come from counseling, and Sarah Ann also comes from the therapeutic world, it's more likely that those questions have been asked. Yeah. Whereas in coaching, even though in the business context, affairs happen, inappropriate relationships with managers or bosses, power dynamic stuff happens, all sorts of things happen. Where do those things get to be spoken to? Someone who's, if you're working with someone in a business context and their goal or aspiration is a promotion or a movement forward, and yet they're blocked by or coming to grips with attraction for the person that's supposed to be their man, like all of that stuff comes up, and we're not really being with it or asking those questions in a lot of these training programs, and a lot of the training programs, at least from what I've heard about them. I didn't do a business training program, so I can't speak to any specific one, but oftentimes they're unaddressed. So what happens when they're unaddressed is, let's see, I'll share the next slide, and I hope I don't lose my thing again. Where'd it go? Oh, over here. Okay. The fun tech stuff of Zoom. Thank you for your patience. I don't know why that's not working. Oh, there it is. Okay, so not necessarily to our fault, but because we don't necessarily get trained in this, many coaches tend to withdraw, avoid, or ignore the giant elephant in the room when attraction arises. We rationalize it as, oh, we're going to stay professional within the ethical codes and guidelines to not talk about that stuff that shouldn't be talked about or seen, or as an attempt not to disappoint our client by putting them down or rejecting them in any way. Okay, we'll just ignore it. We'll pretend it's not there. Yeah, when sometimes it's very obvious that it's there. If our aim as coaches in a helping profession is to improve the quality of our clients' relationships and their ability to navigate them in all their complexity, including sexual attraction in the workplace, yeah, then it's important that we learn to be with the inconvenient truth that attraction is natural and will arise. Yeah. So how can we be with it bravely and in full integrity is the true question. Not whether we're with it or not, but how can we be with it with bravery and integrity? That's the question. Yeah. And there are different ways of being with it or not if it's if it's really out of scope, really out of depth, really feels like something that you're not ready to speak to. What happens now? Does that all make sense? Just sense checking. Anything that wants clarifying or push back if you want. I'll just continue if I don't see anyone. Okay. So I asked some of these questions already. How confident are you and do you feel prepared? Did you ever receive any training in it? Did it feel sufficient? Why or why not? What might be helpful for you moving forward? There's some questions to sit with. Does anyone feel like they'd be totally prepared based on the training they've had, based on what's been spoken to? Seeing a lot of no's. Yeah. Well, there's no surprise. We don't speak about it. So how are we supposed to know what to do with it? Oh, pretty flower. Okay. All right. So just to normalize it a bit, physical attraction, sensations, or reciprocal feelings for your client, yeah, can be unsettling and challenging, especially if they're left unacknowledged. It's important that the client's experience in revealing their feelings to you not be undermined by your own certainty about how to understand and be with what comes up. This is so important because it could cause undue harm to your client. Okay? Unintentional harm to your client. Your own inability to kind of be with this stuff, again, because we're not prepared or we're not trained on it or things take us off guard. How do we be with it? Natural erotic transference is unconscious and thus out of the client's awareness. Skilled coach can help the client identify this and work through it. Transpersonal coaching, relational coaching, all of these kind of things, which you could say business coaching very much is. You're working with relationships with a client, yeah? Is where the unconscious wants to be made conscious, even if it's something super tender like the erotic attraction, yeah? A natural human experience. Yeah, makes sense, right? Why the heck haven't we just spoken about this before? It makes logical sense. Okay, so a note on scope of practice, easier said than done kind of thing with this one. So many times challenges in sex and intimacy or a difficulty for clients in expressing or being with the feelings can come as a result of abuse, yeah, from either their childhood or images or messages they received or experiences they had from our sex negative society and culture, religious teachings, other things, yeah? So if you're not trained to work with trauma, whether acute, developmental, or complex, then you may find that you need to refer the client on to a specialist, yeah? And this can be very difficult to understand because in uncovering or speaking to attraction that may show up in a session, it may be happening as well. It may be happening, it will be happening as a result of one of these things, which I'll explain about in a little bit more depth later on. Yeah. So if you feel like this is out of scope for you to even have this conversation or begin to bridge the topic, that's totally okay, because especially around sex and sexuality, a lot of trauma has occurred, and you absolutely want to have some understanding, depending on the level of trauma and experience of the individual, and how much they may have integrated and worked through the experiences, and understanding of it, to be able to work ethically and responsibly with that person to move through what they're experiencing. Okay, because there's so much nuance and so much messiness here, and so much messiness, and that it can be difficult to understand all of this kind of stuff. This is one of the reasons why I believe people just shove it to the side. Too complex. Yeah, too much to manage, too much to deal with. Belongs in the therapy room or belongs somewhere else. And yet, by not speaking to it and not beginning to have these conversations and understand where one thing begins and the other thing ends, we're doing, I believe, and probably have done, a lot of undue harm to ourselves and also to our clients. So we're pioneering a brave space here to be with this stuff in a new way. So yeah, thanks to all of you guys who showed up, and thanks to anyone watching and sharing in the conversation and sharing what comes through, because it's a lot of it is emergent for me. I'll be very honest, even after working in this space for years and years and years, being with it in this way. Okay, before we go on to this, I just want to sense check with the room again. How you guys doing? How you feeling in your bodies? How are we feeling in the space? Roland's feeling sleepy. This is an exciting topic, Roland. How can you be sleepy?
No, I've had a big month and a big week.
Okay.
And a big day.
Yeah.
But, it's an interesting topic. I've already got lots more questions.
No, great. Do you want to field any? Do you want to ask any now, or you want to hold on to them?
I guess the one that you probably could answer just immediately is, if the relationship's working, if the therapeutic relationship's working, there's respect, there's mutual expression, everything that should be there's in place, and there's change happening, do we automatically assume that there's transference?
What do you understand? Erotic transference?
No, not necessarily. No, just a level of mutual respect. Is that considered transference? I guess maybe that's what I'm asking.
So remember, in one of those earlier slides, and maybe someone from the therapeutic world is also a bit more well-versed than I am, but my understanding of positive transference, when it happens, is that extension of trust that someone has intrinsically in us as coaches to hold that space for them. Yeah, so they're already transferring a certain level of trust and expecting to get a certain level of care, expecting a certain level of respect. So they're already transferring onto us an expectation of what a coach is and what they're going to receive. They're already doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it, and experience of it too. They're more ready to take that step, that leap, and trust in you. That's your job.
Yeah.
But it's an interpersonal one. Yeah, it's an interpersonal question.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add?
I would agree. If there's a relationship, there's likely to be some transference going on. And if the change is happening, yes, you're providing a container, you're providing something, and they're looking for it in you, and they're placing some stuff in you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it feels to me, and this might be very revealing, that positive transference and erotic transference can sit on a continuum of sorts. So because I imagine that that level of relationship happens, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe some people have that erotic transference immediately if you've got a hot therapist. But for me, I guess it also can develop after the positive transference has been in place for a while, because it's almost a natural progression of a good relationship to some extent.
Intimacy,
Yeah.
high levels of intimacy, like Sarah Ann was saying, the longer that she works with clients now, the more intimate the relationship's becoming. They're feeling braver to ask her questions they wouldn't have asked her 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Whether that they're feeling attracted to her whilst they're asking, that's another question. However, they are feeling that level of intimacy growing and are asking, for example, things that they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And where I'll speak to, I have some slides on it that are going to come up, but where also I've had clients, guys, who have said, I want to work with a woman. I have stuff that I'm dealing with from relationships and sex and intimacy, and I want to work specifically with a woman because of it. Yeah. Or women will say, I don't want to work with a man because I need a certain level of safety, and they're making assumptions as well. Yeah. So especially in my world where it's like, okay, we're going to be working directly with sex and intimacy, directly with relational stuff. Yeah. Intimate relational stuff. I've chosen now a woman, right? As a guy, I've chosen now a woman. Or women will sometimes say, but I want to work with a guy. I want the guy's point of view. I want his experience. I want to hear from a man's world. So it's not necessarily because they infer or assume that there's going to be an attraction to their therapist, but because they want another point of view. The attraction could occur over time as a result of the deepening of intimacy and the projected the needs that they're seeing. That we'll go into this in a few more slides, but I'll just speak to it already. The way that the therapist is with them is fulfilling deep relational or intimate needs that they've had from childhood or just in life. And so therefore they begin to feel an attraction towards the therapist because they see the therapist as being able to fulfill those needs.
Right.
Helping the client to recognize that that's what's happening is the work, which is what what therapists do. Yeah. And so that's where it starts to become like, okay, coaching and therapy, where does one thing end and the other begin? Starts to become quite a gray area. And so I feel like for us as coaches, our responsibility is to understand where it starts to become a little bit gray, where we start going out of scope of practice, actually, and we need to kind of call in support through supervision, through other people who have been, or professionals who have been in this longer, who hold ethical standards to a high degree and understand, okay, how do we navigate this? How do we be with this? How much do we become, how much can we understand, and how much can we support our clients in understanding what's happening, so that it remains a beneficially healing relationship for a client and the coaches in integrity.
So can I check one thing then, just since you've answered my question? And maybe I haven't understood the definition of erotic transference properly. But you use the word attraction now, attraction that develops out of intimacy and mutual respect and a good working relationship. Is that the same as erotic transference?
So that feeling which is sexualized, so the assumption you're making, or what you want clarity on, sounds like, when I say attraction, is it sexual attraction? Yeah. Erotic attraction.
Yeah. So erotic attraction, I would understand to be sexual, but the attraction that develops, let's call it I don't know, that feels like there's something in between. Attraction for me feels like it's in between. It's, we've been working really well together. I have huge respect for you, vice versa. We've been really intimate. I like you more and more as a human being. That feels almost halfway to something that could become an erotic attraction. I know it doesn't always happen like that, but yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming that's a continuum. I wouldn't mind hearing from the therapists in the room too.
So can I add two pieces? The one is that certainly therapeutically, I'm delighted that I really like all my clients. I think it's an utter privilege to like one's clients. And so there is a mutual respect and liking. But certainly within therapy, there are boundaries that are important where we meet. So for me, in my room, at the agreed time, we start on time, we finish on time. And those boundaries give you a sense of safety because there is something about the therapeutic process which is not social. And there's that understanding in the contract of I'm the therapist and you're the client. And although I'm not one for major hierarchy, there is something about that contract which says I'm available here for you, leaving my stuff out of the room. To get to that point, there's a little bit of a check-in before a client walks in a room with, how am I feeling today? Am I tired? Am I irritable? So it's a little bit of a scan of oneself before a session begins, because then when the session begins, if suddenly I'm thinking, God, I can't keep my eyes open, I know it has to be part of the transference. So I wasn't tired before the session started. Now I'm like struggling not to yawn. What is that? And I can get curious about that because I'm holding, this is not a purely social engagement. So even though the conversation might be quite jovial and intimate in what is being discussed and shared, I know that I'm not giving them a purely social response. It's a therapeutic response. I don't know if that helps.
It takes me back to something Andrea said really early, when it's definitely inappropriate and unethical to act on it. And I guess for me, that when she said that, I was also, okay, hang on, but acting on something is also for me quite a spectrum. That could be a smile, or it could be on the other end of the continuum, it could be being intimate, physically intimate with your clients. So I'm left with the same. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying about the sort of metaphoric wall that you, or the container that you have. And I think I do hold that container, but that doesn't stop a whole lot of stuff going on for me in my head about the client or vice versa. I mean, I think I've experienced counter-transference way more than I've been aware of transference, because I don't really know what's going on in that person's head. Some clients, I mean, one or two have been really obvious and blatant about it, and then I've had to manage that. But most of the time, I'm thinking, wow, I really like this person. And a couple of times I thought, wow, this person is really, really attractive. And sometimes the one comes after a long relationship with the client. Other times people walk through the door or for their first session, I go, okay, well, this is going to be problematic. I can already feel it. So, yeah, two continuums I haven't quite understood yet.
We'll speak to both of them a bit more as well. There's some very clear ethical guidelines, like in Britain, around touch, for example. So any form of touch, unless you ask explicitly for consent. So a hug, any form of touch, really, unless you explicitly ask, is it okay for me to touch you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for you, that may feel really extreme because you're like, no, when I'm in a business meeting, I'll shake someone's hand and I learned that thing of if you also hold their elbow, they feel more, they're going to trust you more. So I do that at work because that's what I learned. And yet in a therapeutic setting or a coaching setting, it can be different. And there is a continuum and it can be very blurry. And that's where raising our levels of self-awareness and understanding ethical guidelines is really important, because there is a continuum. Yeah. And for someone, a tap on the shoulder might be okay. For another person, it may not be. And we don't really know that until we ask.
Yeah. Yeah, the guidelines are interesting. In the ICF guidelines, there's very little about touch, if I remember correctly. And I think it says something like you cannot be intimate with your client until you terminate your contract, which could be, minutes after you terminate, after your last session.
Yeah, and the ethical standards in the therapeutic world are much more explicit, much more responsible, and much more, I think, maybe responsible is just it. Like it very clearly defines when it's okay, when it's not okay, and why. Because of the very special relationship that we have as coach/therapist and client. Yeah. Like you were saying before, also with positive regard or positive transference, like they are coming into the relationship, not on this, and Sarah Ann spoke to it a bit as well, like even kind of keel, I like them, they like me. We're the coach. We are sitting in a position of power even. Yeah. And and privilege, let's say. And so the abuse of that power is when everything starts to, okay, what is that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've also, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've always felt that in the therapeutic relations that I've been, there has been an element of hierarchy or expertise or power. But in coaching relationships, it feels much more like a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also quite interesting.
And so I would say, Roland, my response to you would be sit with it. And for you, what's your definition of I would say, okay, yes, and yeah, because even if it feels like partnership, the energy exchange is explicit. You show up in a certain way for a certain purpose, which is to help them move forward. They pay you money.
Yeah.
It's a professional working relationship. It's not a friendship, and it's not an intimate relationship. There's difference. So even if it feels like partnership, it feels more like we're on par, we're it. But there is difference, I guess, whether you consider it hierarchy or not, or there's difference. And so understanding, okay, what is that difference? Where might I be abusing the power that comes with that difference? You're always, I would say as a coach, you're always because you're in a helping profession. We're always working towards and for the benefit and growth of our clients. That's my own ethical standard. And so what behavior, what boundaries, what definition of working relationship is going to serve that? And that's my North Star. Yeah. So it's, it's a funny thing with ethics. It's like everyone kind of sits with it a little bit differently. So what for you feels like, and then there are guidelines, and then there's the law. Yeah. So it's like, okay, what does Roland think that's appropriate for him in the context that he works with and the relationships that he's forming and building? What's his actual thing he's doing? What are the considerations from an ethical standpoint? And then what's actually illegal? They can't do it. Yeah. Ooh, it's a flowy world. So yeah. Should we go on? Some of the stuff I speak to a little bit more as well. Again. Okay. Okay, so why it happens. This is common reasons, not all, why sexualized transference happens in coaching. So some of it, a lot of this we've already spoken to, yeah? So maybe this slide we kind of run through a little bit quickly. So childhood experiences and or abuse. So someone extremely sexualized or abused in childhood may have grown up feeling that they have to behave in a sexual manner with people whom they experience as having some power over them or whom they want to please. Okay, so if someone you feel like, oh, this person's always kind of playing at it, or they just show up that way, it may be because what they learned when they were little was that if they behave in a certain way, they'll get their needs met. Attention, focus, love even. Yeah, they were sexualized when they were little. They learned if I act flirtatious with I hate, it always depends. It could be a parent, it could be a caretaker, it could be a teacher. They learned at some point that if I behave in a certain way, my needs will get met. I'll get attention, love, care. Yeah. And so they come in assuming that they need to behave that same way with someone who's in a bit of an authority position, sometimes very much in a position of power or respect. Yeah. It's complex. So I wrote down here just this caveat. Yeah, this is one particular motivator out of many. It's complex. But know that if someone shows up like that, it's likely because of something that they learned about how they're going to get their needs met. Yeah. So surfacing that can be very healing for someone because they can start to understand what's going on for them. So the nature of our work, we talked about this quite a bit. So with developing those deeper and deeper levels of intimacy, and Roland, this was specific to your question or what you brought up the last time, that closeness can be confused sometimes with love or sexual attraction. Yeah. So we can either we can feel it and experience it, and then it can be, okay, is this attraction? Is this sexual attraction? Or is this something that I'm experiencing because I've developed a level of intimacy with someone? It helps us to understand, and there may not be a clear answer, yeah, but it helps us understand why some of this stuff may happen. And then the coach fills the gap. So if the client's current or past relationships don't feel fulfilling in some way, then they see the coach who gives them full attention, who is always there to respond to them. Like Sarah Ann was saying, I sense check myself, I leave me at the door, and this is space fully for the client, yeah? Unconditional love and attention, unconditional focus, yeah? It's a one-way relationship. You give this, they pay you, yeah? So there is an energy exchange, but it's not Sarah Ann spoke to it more eloquently. It's mine was a bit crass, but it's kind of like we're here to support them. We're not necessarily here to get all of our needs met or get what we need. Though we learn, and I find coaching very it does leave me with a high level of satisfaction. And I'm an Enneagram. I'm a 2. I'm a giver. Yeah, it's not really the purpose that we're there for, to get our needs met. But then the client can perceive us as filling a gap in what they might need from intimate relationships. Is that clear? Because I feel like I kind of got a little bit, I'm not sure if I was really clear there. Go on. Okay, so look at it carefully. All right. This comes from the Brighton Therapy Partnership. They write so much good stuff on this topic. So managing erotic transference is a delicate balance between acknowledging a client's feelings and being open to exploration while avoiding defensive or rejecting behavior and maintaining boundaries. Yeah, so it's very nuanced in how we work with this. Okay. So as we would with anything that comes up in a coaching session, listening with open curiosity and being non-judgmental. So if this is something that's rising up, it's being curious about what the person's experiencing. If they're hitting on you, if they're making overt comments, if they're flirting with you, okay, with open curiosity, without judgment, sitting with what's happening. Yeah, because our job is to make the unconscious conscious for the client and help them to understand why the behavior might be happening. So keeping ourselves out of it, it's not about us, our level of how attractive we are, how good of a job we're doing, how much care we're giving. It's about the client and what they're experiencing when it's erotic transference. Countertransference, it's different. Yeah. If you feel again that it's out of your scope of practice, then we look at referring on or suggesting therapy, something like that. There's a few different things that we'll look at as ways forward. Okay, so last time we had this discussion, there were some questions on what do you say exactly? Like, how do you speak it? Do you speak to the elephant in the room? What if you're wrong? What if you say something and the client denies it? And you're like, no, that's not it at all. And then how do you be with that? Or what if it feels like, I'm not really sure. Is it there? Is it not there? Do I say it? Do I not say it? What do we do? And what does that sound like? So again, nuance counts. We never push anyone for details they don't want to disclose. There's healthy internal boundaries by managing any outward display of anxiety or discomfort in the moment, so that the client doesn't feel like so what we want to do is protect our clients as well. And the safe space that we create is also an ability for them to share what comes up, and for us to be able to hold that in a way that, as much as possible, because we're human, yeah, that is where that stuff can be seen and dealt with. So if you feel like this is triggering me, stuff's coming up, then in that space that you're sharing with the client in that moment, as much as you can, be able to control how you're responding, yeah, or manage how you're responding. But you definitely want to be with these feelings later, especially if it's evoking a strong response within you. So through supervision or personal practices, you can move through some of the energy, some of the things that come up, explore it and learn it. I'll speak a little bit to this later. You can emphasize the boundaries of the coaching relationship by words or actions with grace. So sudden changes to boundaries, such as out of session contact because of a disclosure of erotic transference, may feel like rejection and reinforce conditions of worth, or not feeling worthy, basically, for your client. So this is some of the stuff to be aware of. Always explain clearly why you shift your behavior. So if before you were taking calls from them outside of coaching hours, because coaching supports in different ways, oftentimes in therapy where we have more informal, I have text me, WhatsApp, I have kind of like this, text me in between sessions, let me know how you're doing, let me know what's going on. All of a sudden I cut that off because someone's hit on me or made a move. That can feel a lot like rejection for that person, and can cause undue harm, right? So it's like, oh, it's not a bad thing that you expressed your feelings. However, we need to talk about this because the boundaries of our coaching to client relationship are this for this purpose. We need to have conversations around it. Yeah. So if you shift your behavior and say it no longer feels appropriate for us to have out of session contact, then you explaining yourself, explaining the why, and understanding how your client feels about it. It's all very nuanced, and it can be quite contextual as well. So I found this part really difficult you'll see in these slides, of what to say and how to say it, because it can be so contextual, and it can be pretty, sometimes it can feel a little bit foggy. So with the what do I say and how do I say it, it's kind of like, what's going to feel like the right language for you? What's going to feel like the right tone for you and your client? It definitely wants speaking to, but there's so much nuance around it. It's like, okay, I'm having trouble discerning what to say and how to say it. Supervision. I don't really know what to do with this thing. I don't know if it's existing or not. Supervision. Yeah. Always bringing it to supervision, getting that support, and working through it with another professional if you're not really sure what to do. Some of this stuff we've spoken to, so some of this stuff kind of repeats itself. So my suggestions that I have here, please, anyone who wants, that doesn't feel quite right, or if it feels stilted, or I would have said it differently, happy to hear. So you want to normalize. One of the things you want to do is normalize how the client's feeling, right? So I'd like to speak to a few of the comments and behavior you made during our last session. As your coach, it's my interest to help you get what you want in healthy ways. So I'm curious about what you said, if they were hitting on you or if they were flirting with you, and would like to understand it more. Yeah, so that I can understand you more and help you get your needs met, basically. Are you open to talking that through with me? So I'll say it again, I'll say it right now. Some of this language feels stilted to me, and like, would I really speak so formally to a client about this thing? And might there be other ways to communicate it? And these are all questions I'm asking myself and asked myself even as I was creating this presentation, and even as I speak to you here now. So again, like I say, it's emergent for me, and also out of context, so it can be quite difficult to find the right words and verbalize. So yeah, anyone who has anything to add. it's definitely welcome. But the main point of it is normalizing that for the client to begin to feel attraction to their coach is a normal thing for all of the reasons we've just spoken to for an hour. Yeah. So normalizing it is the first step. It's okay that you feel this way. And what we're going to do with it and how we're going to sit with it can look like this, or this. Yeah. So if you feel like it's out of scope of practice, referring on. If you feel like you can be with it and say, I'd like to understand a bit more about what you're experiencing so that we can understand what might be happening in the workplace with you. Maybe it's also happening there. Have you ever experienced this? If you feel like you can use it as material to help your client learn and grow, great. If you feel like, whoa, this is way out of scope, you can refer them to therapy to help them work it out, especially if you're purely a business coach and you're like, this is so relational. Business is relational as well. But if the intimacy element of it feels like out of scope for you, then they can see a therapist or a counselor on it, yeah, who might be better to speak to it with them. You don't have to be with it. Normalizing it's really important, I would say. Okay, so taking away the shame as well. So a lot of times with sex and especially with sex and intimacy, there's so much guilt and shame poured onto it from so many different places that taking away the shame of the fact that they're feeling attraction and erotic attraction, but it's okay. Again, it's kind of like the normalizing thing. But when you take away the shame and you just see them for having natural human kind of responses to things, that can be so healing in and of itself. So even if you just do that, normalize it and help them to not feel ashamed for the things they're experiencing, know that you've done a massive service to them in their healing journey with this particular element of their life. Okay. So let's see. Lightly teach when appropriate. So again, this is taking that, balancing. When does it become a bit like you're feeling condescending or patronizing of, it's after. And so teaching lightly when it feels appropriate. So something like, this may sound a bit new, but you may have experienced attraction towards me as a result of us working together. And this could even happen to you at work too. It's a kind of intimacy that can easily be experienced as romantic attraction. And so I wanted to name it, as it happens a lot. Something like that. I'm interested in maintaining the integrity of our working relationships. So let's talk openly about it and work through it together so we can get back on track with our work. How does that sound? Again, if you feel like you're prepared to have that kind of conversation. Reestablishing boundaries. Oh no, we lost one of our members who's great at speaking to boundaries. So reestablishing your boundaries. Again, normalizing. It's normal to develop attraction for a coach or a colleague. However, if we want to continue to work together effectively, then it's important that we reestablish professional boundaries and draw clear lines. Are you willing to do that? And then you state what they are. Flirtatious behavior isn't welcome. Certain forms of touch are not welcome. Messages at midnight on a Saturday night are not welcome. They detract from our working relationship. Yeah, and I'm here to serve you in that context. And then referring onwards, considering what you're experiencing, I feel it would be best if you found a therapist to help you work through your feelings. If you do that, then I'm happy to continue our work together. If not, I can refer you on to a colleague who can help you further with the work we've done. So you can offer for them to go to therapy if you're, for all the reasons. And if they're like, I don't need therapy, and it continues, then you can say, okay, right, you don't need therapy, you're refusing that, and you're continuing the behavior. I'm going to refer you on now. That feels right for me. Okay. So I wanted to hear if you have, we're focusing a lot on transference in this. I'm going to get to countertransference next. So just know the countertransference stuff is coming up. But I was curious if anyone has experienced any of this already in their practices. And if they have, how they managed it or didn't. And yeah, I just wanted to hear if anyone had an experience with it in the room. We're a smaller number now, so it's okay if not too. I know the two coaches that I spoke to about this in my supervision. I was like, I'm going to do this presentation, and what's been your experience? And both of them were like, no, I haven't really experienced, at least that I was aware of. Like, it hasn't come up, and they're both sex, love, and relationship coaches too. Hasn't really come up in the work that I do. Actually, one of them had received from a therapist that she was working with, was hit on. So she's like, actually, this has happened to me as a client, and it felt really awful, and it was horrible, and I just wanted to get away. It was so unsafe. So she was on the receiving end of countertransference, or transference from the coach, from therapist to. And I'm not surprised, because when do we ever talk about it? And we just kind of ignore it. And so it also might be that. And we're a small number. Maybe sometimes we don't notice it.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just thinking of a client I had, but it wasn't transference. But it was interesting. I mean, this wasn't a coaching relationship. It's a once-off kind of looking into your Enneagram, report and looking at that. And they're going into a workshop that was being facilitated by my colleagues. But the client was quite comfortable saying that, he's had an affair. And I find it, because we were talking about stress and burnout, etc. at work. And because I have quite a red flag about that, because growing up, I noticed a lot of adults cheating. I've had to do work around that, in terms of holding that space and my judgment, and normalize it for myself. And then just coming out of nowhere, the client says that, and how I held that space and, normalized it, going, this happens when there's a lot of pressure and stress, and, kind of going, just being really proud of myself, being able to hold it and not take it on as my thing. At the end of the session, the client was like, so do you have more sessions? Can I sign up with you? And then I almost felt that kind of going, oh, wait a minute, here's the boundary. And I would suggest you see a therapist, or a couples counselor. So that was just interesting to see my reaction to just the client going, what do you do? Because I've been listening to him, and he could speak to me about it, and I was normalizing it. So that's the thing that popped up for me.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. Well done on doing the work. It's so good to be able to hold that space as cleanly as you can, as from a space of kind of neutrality or curiosity about the client. And when we are reactive, it's you can't, just, there's no bandwidth. So well done on doing that work.
Okay. I don't know how I would react if there was a direct flirtation, and that's new. It's almost like being, in a car accident. I'll act this way. When
exactly.
It's like that, I'll be like, whoa, I don't know how I would react. But I think this is really helpful to say, again, it's normalizing, and as the coach, I'm holding the space, and I think because we've not talked about it before, it's like, oh, so this does happen. And there's an appropriate way of managing it. So yeah, this is very interesting.
Well done.
Thank you.
George, you want to share?
Yeah, I just I don't have a direct example other than just thinking through my coaching experience. For some reason, most of my clients have always been women. Not exclusively, but maybe 80%, which is, and I can't think how I deliberately set it up that way. But I'm just wondering if there was something that I was avoiding, or, yeah, so I'm kind of reflecting on why that would have happened like that. And I actually have some new clients starting soon who are men. And I'm thinking it sort of feels a little bit unusual for me. So it's just useful thinking it through. And Cherise, as you say, in the moment, is one prepared? So, or as Roland was saying earlier, it's a continuum, it's often develops and allows one to
be prepared, perhaps. I have had experience of coaching a number of people in the same organization and getting a lot of detail around affairs and relationships and inappropriateness, and it was a while back, so I can't remember to what extent I managed it well or not. Other than I realized that I had become too involved in the organization and I knew too much about too many people. And maybe I could have handled that better.
Yeah. Great reflection. And also, like, you know, kindness and compassion for ourselves when, you know, it's great, all this stuff sounds great, again, on paper or in theory, and then when it's like you're on the ground working with it, woo! Right?
Yeah.
So I think speaking to it is that next best thing of, well, the first best thing of awareness, and okay, how might I deal with it? And then when it actually is that happening, getting the support.
Yeah.
Stumble and are not sure. And yeah.
Yeah.
Good work, Jim. Also recognizing when you feel like, okay, I know too much about the team and the relatedness of the team, and I don't feel I can continue to hold a clear, clean space. Okay, I'm recognizing that now. What do we do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pauline, did you want to add something?
I think what's just as you were talking, Joe, I have another coaching client who is female, and without divulging personal information, there was also kind of a lot of stress and unhappiness in marriage, and a colleague. And I'm just noticing now the judgment I held, maybe because she's a woman. I'm just noticing that now. So it's quite interesting what's bubbling up. And as the coach, it was a coaching relationship. So about near the end, I could challenge her directly around what is this really about? But I do notice my resistance to asking her, at what level is this affair? Because she was not wanting to share that information, but I wasn't asking directly either. That's also just maybe that information wasn't necessary, but my boundary around what is safe to ask, how do I ask it? And I think it came up often, so that I missed opportunities there as a coaching element. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the more interesting things that came out of doing this or preparing this presentation for me is like, okay, where and when is that stuff going to be conducive to the client's like growth and evolution, even within the goals that you've kind of defined for them? Because a lot of this stuff really does shift, you know, it reflects in different parts of our lives, doesn't it? So it's like, okay, Cherise has now created this space where I can wrangle with some of this stuff that feels safe and understand it a bit better and how it might be relating to our work together, but then also, so it's really interesting, you know, and not necessarily right or wrong whether you open that space or not. It depends on how ready you are to hold that space. And again, context, like there is still also that element of context, appropriateness as well, not just scope of work. There are a lot of questions to ask. Yeah, integrity. Ethics. Yeah. Okay. I know it's a lot. Do we want to keep going? How you guys feeling? Keep going, or if you're saturated out, then we can. Yeah, Joe, go for it.
So, Andrea, you said, and I mean, I think we are all aware of this, is how often these boundaries do get blurred in client relationships. So I'm just interested in your experience of what you know, of examples of what's happened, of how people have handled it, of where people have been perhaps disciplined by their profession for it, whether they're, in therapy or coaching. People probably don't volunteer the information where it has been, where they have got into inappropriate situations, unless they're, in supervision. For examples. Yeah. So examples would just be useful in terms of understanding what does happen.
So where I've seen it happen the most overtly is actually in the Tantra world. And I spoke to this in the first presentation too. So in the world of Tantra, it's getting better because there have been so many abuse kind of scandals coming forward. But in that world, oftentimes where it gets blurry, where the boundary gets blurry, is where the practitioner or the guru there's an advantageous element to the relationship with let's call it client or the student. Yeah. So that's where I've seen it most, and how I've experienced it, and where it hasn't personally, and where I've seen it also in friends and other people in that world, is you feel it when it's out of integrity. Like you feel when someone is teaching and when they're starting to overstep boundaries, it starts feeling really kind of creepy and really kind of gross and messy really quickly for the receiver. Yeah. So, and in that world, boundaries look, used to be, it's getting better. They weren't so named quite so specifically or clear. The boundaries weren't as clear. In coaching, I'd have just spoken to a few of, like I was saying, a few of my colleagues. I think, Joe, it'd be really interesting for me to bring it to the wider community of coaches that I have in my circuit, and see how things have been for them and how they've dealt with it, and how they manage it. Thinking back to kind of the corporate world, when I was in corporate for about 20 years as a designer, so doing different things in that space. There was obfuscated. It was always blurry. It was always a bit messy. It was never really clear. And you kind of knew it was a bit dangerous to bring it to HR because then what might happen. And so there's definitely, and I don't think it's gotten that much better. I think we're on our way, but there's still a lot of that kind of, like you experienced even in the teams that you were working with, people, I mean, largely because I would say we don't acknowledge that it's a natural thing that can happen. Companies will oftentimes just make hard rules like none of this or none of that, and then we're human, and so a lot of times the messiness of attraction kind of comes into it, and it becomes less realistic that those strict boundaries are held. So it makes sense that they are, right, that relationships in the workplace shouldn't happen, right? And maybe that's the absolute truth, like a relationship with a coach and a client shouldn't happen, but we should be able to speak about what's rising. That's what needs to be allowed, is having conversations about what's rising. So if in a work context, it was like, okay, someone feels safe in going to HR to say, I feel like, something is emerging here for me. How do I be with it? They can do that and feel safe. It doesn't quite exist right now because it's a lot to hold. I mean, that's why we're having this 2-hour-long conversation about it with people who are experienced in holding safe space. It's like it's complex because we're human and we're complex. But up until now, by not being with it or acknowledging it, that hasn't helped either. So we've got to start talking about it and figuring out how to go forward. That didn't really answer your question. I kind of feel like, let me have a few more conversations with a few more people and see.
I'm just thinking of an incident that, it's probably like 15 years ago, where I knew someone that worked for a big wealth management corporation in South Africa, in Cape Town, actually. And at the year-end function, 2 colleagues were caught having sex in the toilets. and they were immediately dismissed. Like that was firing. Like I don't know if there was any relationship, long-term kind of thing going on, but they were fired. And I'm just wondering now how that would be dealt with in an organization, and if that would be the same kind of thing that would happen. Yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually legal, sex in a public restroom. Might not be. I don't know. Ignorance right there. So yeah. But then, Sheree, your question is really interesting. Of just because they're having an intimate relationship, is that grounds for firing them? Because they're human and they like each other. And it sounds like, okay, well, all right, you were on work premises and the policies say this and that and the other. So there's a lot of things to kind of consider and questions to ask, quite frankly, around it all. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
I have one more question from just the previous slide that you shared, Andrea, and it was about the person who is overly sexualized. I know somebody who was exposed to sexual abuse as a child, and now they have the uncanny ability to change anything into a sexual comment. It's quite irritating at some points. And it's a friend, so it's not coaching or that kind of relationship. And I'm wondering what would be an appropriate kind of conversation around it. Just, what does one say? What does one, notice that, you're able to do this? It's quite an interesting thing. And it's like, yeah, that's what I do. And I think, from what you said is about having needs met, learned that I get attention by doing this. But as an adult, some situations, that's really that the boundaries, it's like, don't go there, in company or something. So I'm quickly react to kinds of stop doing that, and shaming. And I'm wondering what is a better way of dealing with that?
So curiosity is super powerful. And when your intention behind the question is one of, because it's really curious, like, why would someone do that? It is a curious thing. Right? Like, why would someone do that? And so it's like, saying something like, I noticed that many of the comments that you make, at least from my perspective, sound like there's a sexual charge behind them. I'm so curious about that. Can you tell me more? Is that how you experience your language? Is that, and when you do that, do you notice if other people respond in a certain way? Like, not necessarily sequentially like that, but just getting really super curious about, why would someone do that? What are they hoping that the gain is going to be? And might there be another way? Right? That would be when you start turning a little into coach. And, so I also understand it's a bit of a funny one because she's a friend and you're a coach. And so asking the questions, she might start to feel like you're coaching her. And so it can be a little bit tricky to have that discussion. And I would say, it sounds like you're curious, like, why would you do that? What's going on for you? See what she feels safe to share, and also what might be above the line that she's conscious and aware of, and there's might be stuff below the line that she doesn't know how to articulate or find words for, or may even see it for herself if it's really unconscious, right? It's really so
right. I like the kind of also the question around, what have you noticed how other people react, and not putting it in a way of going, are they also irritated or something, but more the like, what's the reactions you're getting from this, like.
Yeah, I can also say I seem to notice that when I'm with you in a group and you ask a question in a certain way, that the response, that what I see is that the response from people is of shock, and then they, you can also share your experience. Did you notice that too, or is that often what you get? And so staying in that I position of, this is what my experience is, this is what I'm observing, I'm curious, are you seeing something different, or are you experiencing it differently? I'm just super curious.
Great, thank you, that's helpful.
Because then you might see how from her point of view, it's like, okay, I get how from your point of view it might be like you're, acknowledging that she has a point too as well. Communication.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck. Let me know how it goes.
Thank you. Yeah, that'll be a learning curve to share.
All right, shall we go onward for a bit more? You guys are great. You're staying with. Oh, let's see. Okay, so what's next? Ooh, another beautiful flower. They're pretty. How to know when it's happening, overt and covert signs and signals. I kind of wanted to look to this a little bit. A few signs of erotic transference happening. All of a sudden, a client may find reasons to touch you in a certain way or come closer into your space, maybe giving you gifts, flirtatious comments, or even confess attraction. Clients can also use suggestive language to ask about your personal romantic life, which may feel out of context. So coaches have, in general, as coaches, what I've been encouraged to do is share my story. So share your story so that others can relate to you. Share your story so that the right clients come to you in the right moment. Share your story, always to the point where it's helpful to the client, but share your story. Yeah. If it begins to feel inappropriate, then it's inappropriate. So here I say also trust your intuition. Yeah. Erotic energy does not always manifest overtly. And this might be something like that elephant in the room, like there's something there. I feel like there's some sort of attraction, there's something, and that's okay if there's some level, like it could stay in that positive erotic transference space. It could stay in that, okay, it's coming up. We don't really need to speak to it because it's there, to a point where it becomes so much so that it feels right to name it at that point. Yeah, if you're just not quite sure, is it the right time to name it? Am I maybe making it up? Is it really there? Is it not there? Bring it to supervision, explore it with support. Yeah. Sometimes it's really difficult, like, to be honest, and, completely true to the experience. It can be really hard to understand. Is this happening? Is it not happening? Is it something I'm feeling and experiencing? Are they also as well? And it can get a little bit tricky to untangle that. Okay, countertransference. Yay, finally, it's normal. Woohoo, it's normal for us too to like our clients and to feel attracted to them. Well, liking our clients, I hope we mostly like the people that we work with, but then feeling attraction is different. So a peer-reviewed journal provides evidence-based research that 95% of male therapists and 76% of female therapists have sexual feelings towards clients. So it's pretty darn normal. Like much more than half. A lot of people have sexual feelings towards their clients. Yeah, we are highly sexual beings as humans. Let's admit it and talk about it so that we know how to be with it ethically, responsibly, and in healthy ways. Yeah, so you're not alone. Probably why we got 8,500 views. Okay, so also for us, erotic countertransference is natural and normal. It's natural and normal to feel attraction to a client. Here, it's often a combination of a reaction to a client's projections, an expression of the therapist, and an expression of the therapist's inner world. Or it could originate from you alone. Yeah, so it's not necessarily dependent on a client projecting all their stuff onto you and then also what you experience as a result. It could also just be you feeling the things that you feel when you're developing a relationship with someone who you're attracted to, like Will and bravely shared. So, right. So as a result, if it happens, right, it's like, oh, shoot, this isn't right. Like, on some level, like, oh, this isn't supposed to happen, right? So you can feel scared and unsettled, ashamed and guilty, have self-doubt, feel ungrounded, thrown off, isolated. Who do I talk to? I can't tell anyone. This is totally wrong. And exposed. So a lot of the feelings that your client might actually be experiencing if they are feeling attraction towards you. Yeah. So we already discussed how many of us, probably because we've never been prepared for this, can avoid it, discussion of it, reduce our level of support. So we withdraw consciously or unconsciously, we withdraw in some way. We panic, and then we just move on. Don't really take time to reflect. And And then if you're acting out, you might begin to offer gifts or flirt or break boundaries, this kind of thing. Yeah. Not great either way. If the coach experiences sexual feelings for a client, the coach may become inappropriately involved with the client or aloof to the client in an effort to maintain emotional distance. Either of these responses can cause further injury to the client. Yeah. So if you try doing the old tactic of just ignoring it, it's not really there, it's not really happening, you're pulling away. Yeah. Or you become involved with the client. So it's either that, it's almost like fight or flight, right? We're fleeing from it or we're moving towards it. It can cause undue harm. So, and we've spoken about this a lot already. So let's see what we have here. So there are ethical standards. Again, these are borrowed mostly from the therapeutic world because they're more explicit in defining what's okay and what's not okay than the coaching world. So this is borrowing from them, and I replace therapist with coach, and it's not verbatim necessarily. So you want to go in there and really read for yourself. I was trying to get a little bit the heart of things. We spoke to bring it to supervision 1,000 times. It's there for a reason. If you're a coach and you don't have supervision, I highly recommend it. I have peer supervision with two coaches who are my peers, and we do it as we do it without payment. So we show up for each other. We're committed to it. It's been going on for 3 years now. We offer professional support for one another. Yeah, and we do it that way. There's many ways to get support through supervision. Okay, so do you disclose to your client that you're feeling attracted to them? Do you tell them? This is again a very tricky one. So again, the guidelines suggest disclosure should only be made if the therapist or supervisor, you talk it through, with your therapist or supervisor, and you feel that it would have the client's best interests at heart to actually share. So again, client comes first and your due care and due diligence to them, accompanied with a clear therapeutic rationale for disclosure, right? So there's a clear reason why you are disclosing to the client that you have feelings for them. And you've understood, because context and all the nuances, you've worked through this with an external voice, another therapist or supervisor in this case. Make sense? Okay. We'll borrow again from these guys because they have it spelled out. ICF, from what I read, did not. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll share with what I read on ICF's thing. Okay, so acknowledging to yourself that this thing's happening. Yeah, so that awareness building from unconscious to conscious, if you're able to do that for yourself, super powerful. Noting what's showing up and the impact it's having on the work that you're doing and also on you, and how it may possibly be impacting your client. Yeah. Strengthening those internal boundaries, that self-control. Yeah. Internal boundaries of not letting out words or actions that overstep boundaries. Gently reinforcing boundaries in a tentative, non-rejecting way, if that needs to happen. Inviting collaboration rather than imposing meaning. This is if you're deciding to discuss this with your client. And this goes for erotic transference as well as countertransference. Managing outward displays of discomfort, distaste, or anxiety. Again, I would say this is more in relation to erotic transference. But if you're really just feeling high levels of discomfort because of your responses to your attraction to a client, then managing that, learning how to manage that in many ways. Temporarily shutting off, compartmentalizing where necessary, and I added to that before, going to into personal practices or therapy to work it out, to express, to integrate, to work it out. Ensuring that you're consistently behaving to this client as you would with the others. So that withdrawing support or shifting how you're relating to them and behaving in ways that are different from the ways that you behave normally with clients make sure that your behavior stays consistent so they don't feel rejected or wonder, what am I doing? Like, why all of a sudden this person has changed their behavior? It can really erode the integrity of the container of safety and trust that you've created. And then not steering discussion away from topics of attraction. So this is super tricky. So if you're feeling attraction towards the client and they bring up subjects of I'm attracted to my boss, or I'm attracted to my colleague, or even attracted to you, are you able to have those conversations even as you're feeling attraction towards a client? So Cherie's mentioned a lot of the work that she's done on herself in order to be able to not be so reactive or maintain kind of like a more neutral kind of composure or experience with a client for stuff that feels sticky. This is our work to do as space holders. This is our work to do as coaches. This is our work to do as therapists, that we can be with the stuff that's going to come up. So if you haven't considered looking at this in your life, then you may want to maybe help. Okay, so the ways that you can be with us, we said it a million times: personal coaching and therapy, supervision, another one. Well, we didn't talk about this one so much, but maybe consider getting therapy or coaching to help you understand what's coming up for you in relation to the client that you're working with. What's in your, what are they doing for you, or what are you projecting onto them? What are you hoping for to receive from them that you haven't had in your life, whether it was in your early childhood or in your current relationship or in past relationships or in life in general? Understanding that. Yeah, I just spoke to that a bit. Supervision, referring onward if you really feel like, no. And then alchemize the energy. So we spoke about this a little bit. These are personal practices you can do to learn to work with, explicitly with, erotic energy or sexual energy, to transform that energy and channel it into a neutral space, different from suppressing the energy. So this is also something that's really super key for your clients as well, because attraction and the erotic and this energy wants to express. The expression doesn't always have to happen like anger management or any other strong emotion. It doesn't have to express in a certain way in that moment when you learn how to work with it in a different way. Same with erotic energy, same with turn on. I work with my male clients a lot on this, or learn to. The appropriate display of attraction towards someone. If it's not appropriate, what do you do with that energy? And that's a question I get asked a lot. What do I do with this energy? I've got so much of it. Then we work with alchemizing the energy through, this is where my Eastern practices come in more, through Taoist energy work, and working with that energy of the erotic so that they can work with it in their bodies, in their systems, in ways that are more responsible. They can manage the energy, they can play with the energy, they can channel that energy into creative projects or into other spaces and places. It's not a denial or repression or suppression of that energy, which is what has gotten us into trouble. It's learning how to, with my supervision, we were talking about like taking that energy and doing something new with it. Yeah, so you're not deflecting it within yourself, you're working with it and channeling it in. It's like the Tai Chi of, because it is, it's a practice, and it can be quite new it was new to my world for sure. I'd never heard of that before. I was in the world of Tantra and learned about it there, energy work. Yeah. If you're curious about it, you can DM me, you can email me, you can ask me more. It's part of a whole other body of practice. That's quite beautiful and empowering. I have a couple of books I think that I recommend here. Okay. Right. So some of the questions I asked here were, have you ever experienced it? Did you know what was available to support you through it? Now that you do know, and you do know more about this, how much more ready do you feel to kind of be with this in your own work? Some of the questions to sit with. We have 10 minutes left. How are we doing? Any big questions come up out of this part of it? There's more, I think, ethical guideline-y type stuff coming up. Oh, yeah, even more. So yeah, Joe, go for it.
No, Andrea, I'm just fascinated just hearing the little tidbits of your Eastern influences, because it's just something that I'm completely unfamiliar with. So I think you're gonna have to come back for a third time and do a session on some of those practices, if you'd be willing to, or yeah, I'm interested in the books that you refer to. It's just so I know of it, but very little about it. And it just sounds like an interesting influence to explore.
It's life-changing. It really is. So yeah, I'd gladly come by for a third session if Aephoria wants. Maybe we can run it by Julia and the team and see. But yeah, I'd be happy to. And I also suggest a couple books that you can do some self-learning with as well. Yeah, there's more on ethics. I didn't think it was going to be this long, this presentation, so I apologize because I want to respect the timeline, but I'm also seeing that there's a few other things to share, points that we could speak to. But even if the law in the UK does not forbid sex with a client. In some US states, not all of them, it is against the law. Yeah. Pretty much everywhere in the world, in the counseling and therapeutic world, it breaks ethical standards. Whether you're with a client, so what does that actually look like? This was the code of ethics from the ICF. It's pretty much all I found. Roland, it sounds like you found a little bit more than I did, but I didn't. I could have looked more. I could have dug a little bit more deeply. It was much easier to find guidelines that were very explicit on dual relationships, once a client, always a client, the power dynamics or relational dynamics that's different from a two-way one like friendship or intimate relationships or true partnerships. I would add that. Thanks to Roland. Because clients come to you in a position of need. There's something that they need, and there's a service that you're fulfilling. So that's spoken to in the ethical guidelines the British have. I'm flying through this because we're out of time, but you can also read through it yourself. So conflicts of interest, issues of power or dependence may continue after a working relationship with the client, supervisee or training person. Yeah. So you close the door on your coaching relationship, and tomorrow you go out on a date. The BACP recommends otherwise. So they want you to run through a whole list of questions. Has enough time elapsed? Are the therapeutic dynamics from the former relationship sufficiently resolved? Is there an equivalent service? Should the client need to come back to you at a future date, even if that's in a month, even if that's in 3 years, where they can get the service that you provided? Yeah. Can the coach ensure that the new relationship has integrity and is not exploitative of that position of maybe hierarchy, or that special, unique position that we had as advisee, as guide, as leader, as sometimes some people see it as guru, as coach, as therapist, that unique position that we had. Yeah, even as we walk next to them. We're in a unique position as guide, yeah? Even as a partnership, our position is definitely different and unique. Yeah, can we ensure that if we enter into an intimate relationship with this person afterwards, that we're not going to take advantage of this relationship that started off with a very different energy? I'm flying through this. We'll share the presentation if you guys want, so you can read a little more carefully. Yeah. So there are more questions to ask. What does this bring up? What are your next steps of understanding where you're ready to be with this kind of stuff? And I feel like we've opened a lot of doors here. So yeah, with a couple minutes left, maybe we just share where we're at. And I can also share how I can, if you want to be in touch with me, ask any questions, have chats about this stuff, I'm available as well. But let's, maybe have a check-in in our last few minutes together. I'm kind of looking back over some of the questions that were answered or asked. The one I didn't really get to was the paramilitary, in a traumatized paramilitary environment. That one that was asked in the very, very beginning. I guess part of it might be what we did answer to was, if people are beginning to open up about these experiences and we don't feel like it's within our scope of work, or we're prepared for it or have prepared for it, how can we begin to prepare for it if we're interested in being able to open that space? And in the meantime, what's the responsible thing to do so that those people get the care that they need, the support that they need, in order to process through those things in healthy ways? I think that's kind of where we've landed in a nutshell.
Any other reflections? And as we've got 1 minute to go.
Yeah, and all the questions on, like, all the other questions, the personal life kind of questions. We didn't get to any of those, but this felt like the important stuff to do in this forum. So again, I'm happy to do another session. Maybe that can be rolled into if we do the Eastern energy thing.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely do that. Joe?
So I just think there's so much good information in what you've shared. I would like to have the slides kind of saved as a resource that when I need to think about it again and go back to it, that would be really useful. Some of those reactions and phrases and things to think through and questions, I'm not going to remember and have ready in the moment, but I will know where to go and find them, certainly as a first port of call, maybe even before supervision. So thank you.
Great. Yeah. I'm glad it felt helpful.
Oh, it was great. It was very informative. It just amazes me how light the ICF is on this thing and the coaching. I mean, I was on the ethics committee for Commensa way back, and the ethics was also light and quite self-referential, I think. I can't remember the term they used for it, but it was very much a subjective kind of processing of ethics. So I'm wondering whether you couldn't tap into one of your local ICF chapters, because it feels like there's no cross-pollination between, the psychological associations and the coaching associations for this kind of thing. Having said that, I guess it's easier to stay out of that zone in coaching because by definition it's contained, whereas in a therapeutic relationship, any topic is really open for discussion. Whereas, I mean, I tell my clients we can talk about anything, but I think you will feel, if you're not trained or comfortable, if the topic is about attraction or sex and it's made explicit, I wouldn't feel comfortable to go there. So I would just say, look, it's not my area of expertise, and refer, which is another thing coaches do really badly. I think they don't know when to refer.
And I also feel, I would say yes, and I would push back a little bit because so many affairs happen in offices and people don't know how to deal with them. And they oftentimes have to do with they also kind of intermingle with why someone might, I don't know, Roland, are you doing business coaching? Or maybe it doesn't come up for you, but if it's business coaching, because we don't speak to it, it happens, but it's not spoken to. It's happening. It's happening. So I would, before I did all this training, there's no way I would have ever felt comfortable having any of those conversations or even know how to begin to approach them with people I was mentoring when I was a leader in teams in this environment. And yet, because we don't speak about it, the yucky stuff continues.
Yeah.
Like the way it comes out the sides and the seams and the way it's all, because we don't speak to it, because we don't talk about it, because it's not within our remit, because it hasn't been until now, or we haven't been open to opening to it in whatever way, it's kind of like the yucky stuff's going on. So the stuff that just isn't, it wants speaking to. And that energy, the thing that's beautiful about that energy, if we do the Taoist kind of like practices, is that energy can be harnessed. It doesn't have to be squished out. It doesn't have to be, it gets either squished down or comes out the sides, expresses in a different way. There are other options. There's a third way. The third way is to take that energy, transmute it, like you work with it and have it come out as creative expression, or have it, or channel that energy into putting more behind a presentation or something. So, but unless you've learned about that, you would never even think, like Joe was like, I didn't even know that was possible. It's like, it's absolutely possible. It's just creative life force energy. That's all it is. Yeah, that wants expression. It wants to move. So it'll move. It's gonna move. Might as well begin to talk about how we help our clients move it in healthy ways. Yeah, or refer on and feel confident about referring on. Yeah, if we're just not interested or feel like.
Yeah, I think that's profound in terms of organizations. It's definitely needed. I was referring specifically to transference and counter-transference in coaching versus therapy. It's much easier to avoid making explicit in coaching, and yet there are less guidelines around it.
Yeah.
Or maybe therefore there are less guidelines around it. I don't know.
Yeah, because like some of the slides were saying is like we just avoid it. Like we ignore the elephant in the room. We just we shove the elephant in a closet or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, what else are we going to do with it? It doesn't feel appropriate because it's not necessarily ever been made okay to say, actually, it's normal to feel attraction to this person, and there's no shame in it because it's a normal thing. However, to deal with it in a healthy way in a particular context, which is work, these are the things you can do. Like, these are the ways you can be with it. This. And as coaches as well, it's like, okay, within our own little coaching bubble with our clients, it's like it's also a similar kind of process of saying, these are the things that emerge. This is the stuff that might happen. It's okay. Totally normal. And it wants to be seen, otherwise it wouldn't have come up. And so can we suggest a different space where it can be seen with therapy or do we begin to develop the skills to have conversations around it if that feels available and we're interested in that? Yeah, it's a question. And everyone's answer is probably going to be different. And the good thing is that there's no right or wrong. It's like any combination of, I'm going to refer them out. I'm going to begin to have these conversations to a certain point. And when it doesn't feel safe for me anymore, or I feel out of my depth, I'm going to then refer out or ask for support. Or I'm going to decide I don't have these conversations. However, it's something important for the client to understand because it's coming up in their workspace as well. I'll very much suggest to them they find a therapist to work with. So it's a relational thing. It's going to be important for them if they want to manage relationships in the workspace, in the workplace. They're going to have to know how to do this thing. So yeah, lots of options.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not even talking about the body generally at work. I think that's part of the first problem. I mean, never mind specifically about sexuality, but and that's I did a thesis in 2015 on that subject. Why are we not talking about the body at work? But this would be a proper revolution if we can get people to, I think we have to get them to talk about the body first. I mean, we do live in a sex negative society and we're only getting our head around being body positive right now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and nervous system regulation is becoming more and more of a common kind of, like, people are starting to talk about their nervous systems in ways that they haven't before, right? So now there are business coaches that will work with, they'll do nervous system, or they'll sometimes say it because it sounds nice to the business world, right? Like to be able to say neuro-linguistic programming, or not even NLP because that's been around for a bit, but working with the nervous system more directly is becoming more and more a thing. Neuroscience says that, it's actually my nervous system that wants to do fight, flight, freeze with my boss rather than stay. And, how can I regulate my nervous system so I can have those difficult conversations with my boss? Like, those conversations are starting to happen, and more coaches are doing that work. So you are really revolutionary and ahead of your time for bringing that in. Keep doing it. If you haven't already, do it. Yeah, because it's happening. All right. Bye, Joe.
Pop off. Bye, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cherise. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Joe. Good to see you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
lovely to see you. Thank you, Andrea, for coming through again and for giving us more tools and having conversation about this. I mean, this is how we change things. We talk and we talk. So excited to have you back again. We will surely organize that. So we'll be in touch with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrea.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Cherise,
Bye.
I want to ask you about that Fight Club picture.